This podcast was brought to you by Meros cryptocurrency. Meros is a cryptocurrency payment system that does what cryptocurrency originally intended to do. Be a practical and secure form of direct payment, Meros utilizes the best of current technology in a powerful new way. It introduces a groundbreaking consensus mechanism called merit caching. This enables Meros to be both feeless and instant while maintaining the same level of integrity of traditional networks like Bitcoin. To find out how you can participate in the future of crypto payments, go to meroscrypto.io now.
Hello and welcome to State of the Project Meros with me, your host Cryptosi. And this is the November edition where I get to speak to the lead developer about all the things that are happening within the Meros project. So, because we've got an absolutely jam-packed episode coming up, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the enigmatic man himself, Kayaba. Kayaba, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I'm always happy to be here recording a new episode, and I'm excited for this one.
Well, we have been talking off air for longer than usual, so I'm absolutely stoked about all the content that we're going to get through today. So thank you for joining us on our podcast. So first of all, have you managed to complete the much talked about Meros protocol changes?
So the short answer is not yet, but I'd really like to take a second and go into all these protocol changes.
Right.
We used to have two separate DAGs. We had a transactions DAG, where you just, have your transactions, so on. And then you had the consensus DAG. And the consensus DAG was ordered by merit holder from 0 to 1, 2, 3. It was incrementally ordered. And that's how you got access to votes. So when blocks came into play, in the blocks we specified, hey, merit holder now has 10 elements. This merit holder now has 20 elements. This merit holder, so on. And it was just a very quick and small way to reference the existing data. So the protocol change we're doing is truly needed to support a lot of optimizations I'm really excited for in the future. But to simplify it down, the new protocol gets rid of the consensus DAG. It just wasn't optimal for a bunch of reasons that I hesitate to get into them on this podcast because it would probably take the full time span. But now, instead of saving them to the consensus DAG, we save them directly in the blocks, which really just enables optimizations, as I've said. The issue with that is by saving them directly in blocks get very, very, very big, beyond reason. So our solution to that was something called pin sketch.
When you say the blocks get very big, now big blocks are, it's a matter of opinion, I guess. If you speak to somebody from Bitcoin Cash, they'll have a different opinion as to what too big of a block is. So how big are these blocks that we're talking about?
I try to do all frame of reference from 1 megabyte, Bitcoin's block size. Although technically they're now 2 megabytes thanks to SegWit. And I understand that's definitely on the smaller end, and I'm not trying to deny that. I'm just saying that's generally the reference number I work with personally.
Right.
So every transaction, if we just directly include it with no optimizations, would take roughly 100 to 150 bytes. So if we're talking for the scale of 10 minutes, which means we have 600 seconds, and because this is always done in transactions per second, we would get roughly 11 TPS at 1 megabyte, which is not a number I'm happy with, especially because we're already syncing a lot of data outside the blocks. So because we're already syncing that data outside the blocks, it becomes, how do we not include the data but reference it like we used to do, even though now we no longer have the consensus DAG? And that's where pin sketches come in. It's this amazing algorithm where if you set a 20% tolerance, let me step back. By taking one sketch made out of X elements and one sketch made out of Y elements, you can not only figure out what elements are in the sketch, but what elements you're missing. And it's just really exciting technology because beyond that, if you want to support being able to recover 20% of elements, so if you are missing more than that 20%, you have to sync them anyways. But to set a 20% tolerance, the sketch is only 20% the size as the actual data. But despite that, it allows recovering any of the elements that you may be missing. So it's just really peak efficiency, to say the least. And it's something I'm very excited about adding to Meros. And we are working for now off a 20% tolerance. Yet thanks to other optimizations we've made along the way, it ends up only being roughly 1.5% the size, which transforms that initial 11 TPS number into a lot higher.
Yeah.
730.
11 TPS is not much. Am I right in saying Bitcoin is around 7 transactions per second?
Bitcoin is 7 to 8, and they're looking to second layers, while Bitcoin Cash just simply tries to... Well, Bitcoin's also including SegWit, which helps out, while Bitcoin Cash looks to increase the block size. I was actually on the SegWit 2x side of that debate. I thought SegWit was efficient at helping out. I thought it was technological innovation. But SegWit also requires people to write the code to adopt. It's not automatic and on everyone. So I appreciate how an actual block size increase would help in the moment. I'm disappointed how Bitcoin didn't increase their block size except via SegWit, and how Bitcoin Cash seems to be increasing it despite having nowhere near the amount of transactions required to fill it. And the second it does get filled, they would require terabytes of storage for each of their nodes.
Yeah, and are the nodes even incentivized to carry that much storage?
Exactly. So with Meros, with the 1 megabyte block size, I did say the number 730 TPS, but it's really important to remember that in our system, we're not just talking about blocks. We still have the transactions, and we still have the actual verifications.
No. You said 730 transactions per second. That's what we're demanding now.
Would fit into the block. That said, we still have data coming from other angles, so it's not like our blocks are going to be 1 megabyte done and done. We're still going to require nodes to have a bit more storage than that, and we'll likely see the slowdown being from signature verification and transaction processing rather than block processing.
Yeah. Okay, it takes us on nicely to network cleaning. So what kind of, or how have you been cleaning up the network, and why?
So this actually refers to the network stack that we work with. It uses a lot of the NIM libraries. It's something I actually really appreciate about NIM, the language Meros is written in. It has a lot of quality networking libraries available to handle asynchronous networking, and I just really appreciate how it's part of the standard lib and well documented. So we built our networking stack around those libraries, and it's been interesting so far. One of the things we did was we wrote out too many error types. I believe we had 3 different errors that basically meant the same thing. They didn't technically mean the same thing, to be clear. They all had their own purpose, but for all effects and value, we were handling them the same way because they told us the same info, despite having different causes. So we really were working on merging those 3 errors into a single error and rearranging our code a bit, because this new protocol also comes with a new method of syncing. It's just one of the optimizations we decided to do while we're at it, because there's no longer the consensus DAG, and that changes things. So we decided to optimize while we're there. And while I was working on the new syncing code, I decided to clean up the networking code to make it easier to work with. And because the networking code at the time was, I think personally, was the worst code in our code base. It was just really frustrating and tedious to work with. So I'm really happy at what it's becoming.
Did you do the networking code? Was that one of the first things that you done when you started programming Meros?
No, initially I did it all locally. So, you have the blockchain, you have the transaction DAG we had at the time. We had the version of the consensus DAG we had at the time. It wasn't actually the consensus DAG we see nowadays by far. And of course, now we're removing it. But so things have changed a lot, but it wasn't the networking code that we did first. No, first I worked on making sure we had a working blockchain and transactions DAG to actually add stuff to, which is what the network does. It informs you of new additions.
Okay. So what do you think it was about creating the networking code the first time around that made you not create it in an optimal way? Was it kind of like a chicken and an egg type thing, whereby you kind of have to create it and test it to then see what's optimal and then go back and improve it? Is that kind of like a reason why?
For the reasons you've said, I've had to rewrite various parts of Meros multiple times. I believe we even talked about this on our Discord. The question was, how many versions has each section of the code base been through? And I think what it came up to, this is just off the top of my head, I'm quickly scanning to see if here are the numbers that I came up with. If I recall correctly, I've redone the blockchain 5 times since I've started Meros. I've redone the transactions DAG 3 times, and this is the 4th redo of the consensus DAG. I've just always found better and better ways, and I've not wanted to commit to this technical debt because each redo, it doesn't necessarily have to change the protocol. Sometimes it's just making the code cleaner and cleaner. And because of that, we could launch with the worst version and deal with it after. And that was the plan for the networking code until we changed the protocol to the point where we might as well. But the reason I generally try to clean code if it doesn't need to be cleaned, it's just optimal, is because even if it could be modified to meet the protocol, generally the way it's written implements bugs. And it would be easier to rewrite it than to handle the bugs within the existing code base. And beyond that, it's always great to have a clean code base. It makes stopping bugs easy. It makes layout easy. It's better to get new developers on, better to write tests. So I've always been trying to find that balance. What do you do before mainnet and what do you do now? And cleaning the networking code, which has also already been rewritten a few times, that was something I was planning on putting off. It's just with this new removing the consensus DAG has changed the protocol so much for the better. I already have to rewrite most of the networking code. The reason why I implemented so many different errors, notably just because that's something really easy and simple to call out, was the karma system. The idea was one represents an invalid client. Just no idea how it's invalid, but it's invalid.
Yep.
One represented a client that wasn't meeting the protocol.
Yep.
And one represented a client that was meeting a protocol but wasn't sending valid data. Like if they sent a transaction, but instead of specifying the amount of Meros, they sent definitive gibberish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had 3 different messages, and the idea is one would be a disconnect, one would be a large amount of karma reducted, and one would be a little bit of karma deducted. But really looking through it, if the client's not meeting the protocol, the one that they said they were on, you shouldn't try to reason with them. You should disconnect them.
Yeah.
If they're not sending a double spend, but they're truly sending invalid data that's truly invalid, you shouldn't reason with them, because even though they're technically meeting the protocol, they're not actually sending the data defined by the protocol, so they're not.
Yeah.
So really it was just planning for a karma system that was overthinking it and not going for the simpler option. Or if a client is being definitively invalid, don't bother.
Okay. Right. I want to move on rapidly because we are going to be pressed for time. I want to jump into the GitHub, and there was 2 critical issues that were raised this month, albeit the 2 issues were very closely related, and they reference block headers causing another proof of work hash. Now, could you please explain what this was about and what kind of detriments it will cause for the Meros network?
Right. So this was uploaded as a total of 3 issues. Only 2 were more critical, though, for the timing. So these 2 issues were basically the same. It's just that they had 2 different avenues of being exploited. So 2 different reasons. One could be fixed without affecting the other whatsoever. So the first one is that when we're sent a new block header, we perform a proof of work hash on it, which isn't expensive on its own. We're not mining it, but it's still somewhat expensive. But the issue is if we've already been sent that block header, then we already know it's proof of work hash, and there's no value to hashing it again. It just takes up time. And because it takes time, that could be exploited. Basically, if you're being sent the same header over and over again, not only is that congesting your network, but it's also having you run a bunch of proof of work hashes, which can be expensive.
Right.
And then beyond that, that was the flip side. There was the flip side. When you request the block header, when we grab it from the database, we parse the data and then run a proof of work hash on it. Because the thing is although we index it by the hash, because the hash is the proof of work hash, we don't differentiate there. So we do index it by the proof of work hash, but the actual value doesn't have the hash included. So when you parse it, because we don't pass that hash along, it has to recalculate it. So that was the other attack. Every time you were requesting a block header, that also caused a proof of work hash, and that was also another exploit for a denial of service attack.
Yes.
So they're 2 of the same issue with 2 different angles, and because of that, I bothered to create 2 different issues.
Okay.
They're both relatively simple fixes. They're just not my priority now. I think out of the 12 issues we have, which is a bit unfortunate to admit this, but I think 7 are critical. I think if I spent 2 days, I could fix 5 to 6 of them.
Right.
The only reason I have it was just because they're simple, they're tracked, it's going to be fixed before mainnet. I'm not ignoring them. I just rather focus on the bigger picture right now because that's what's important to me.
If somebody did perform a DOS attack using this sort of method by constantly pushing through these block headers, what would happen to the network? Would it grind to a halt, or what would actually happen? How would the network be affected?
So if Meros detects a block header, it's already been received. It doesn't send it out to anyone else. So basically, it would just be one person sending it to one node, and that would be it.
Right. Okay.
So it's not a network thing. It's really on the node level. You can try to attack a node, but if it's the node of a miner, you could try to exploit that to use up their hardware to stop them, have them mine less blocks and then get a profit advantage from it.
Yeah. So it's basically just to be spiteful. It's not really. I guess it's not. Funds are still safer.
Right. There's not a way where you can knock off half the verifiers, and because half are gone, you need half the amount to verify something. No, you still need the full amount.
Right. Okay.
It's really just to profit advantage for miners by knocking a competitor miner off, or just to be an ass.
Yeah. And there are plenty of those in the crypto sphere, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The next merge I wanted to speak to you about, it was called Update, the latest Pi lint. Linters. Generally, in England, lint is something we get on our trousers and our jumpers sometimes, and we have to roll it off, and it's a real pain. Pi lint, is it the same? Could you explain it for us, please?
This podcast has been brought to you by Rhubarb Media. Rhubarb Media are the branding specialists behind successful crypto projects such as PivX, Vendible, and Libertaria. The Rhubarb style is both loved and respected the world over. So if you want your project to appeal to techies and everyday users alike, give Rhubarb Media a try. You cannot possibly be disappointed. Link is in the description.
So lint in the code world, generally we don't talk about lint, we talk about linters. But lint in the code world means code that doesn't meet the style guide, code that's ugly, code that's unclean, code that doesn't follow the best practices. It may not be broken code, it may not be glitchy code, but it may use 8 spaces for an indent when it should have only used 4 or 2. So a linter just goes around and says, hey, this code works all right, but your style's a bit off. Here's how it's wrong, and here's how you should make it better. So we use heavily modified linter settings from the default pilot, to be clear. Just because there's a lot of style that I've picked up from NIM, and even though the Python code in our project is distinct from the NIM, I like the two having a similar style guide, even though, yes, the Python does have several to make it more Pythonic. So basically, when we updated our tools, just because it's always good to do frequent updates, it caught a couple things that it previously wasn't having a problem with. So it was just updating the code base to handle them, to not trigger the linter.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm going to move on to the community questions. We got one from a joker. Well, I shouldn't say a joker. A person called Quack Quack. He obviously doesn't take himself too seriously. And his question was, is Meros just a pet project? I guess what he means to say is how much are you doing Meros for your own to gauge your own ability, and how much are you doing it to deliver something that the world can actually use?
I think if someone has a username Quack Quack, that doesn't mean they're not taking them serious at all. I think they could be a totally serious person. Have you ever played the amazing Goose game where you run around as a goose? Quite a serious game, thank you very much.
I have not.
Jokes aside,
yeah, go ahead.
Our very serious asker, I completely respect that username. I just want that on the record.
Well, I'm not sure I do, but yeah, go ahead.
I've already published a bit of a response to this. And what I wanted to communicate is Meros is not a pet project. It's not something I'm doing just to test cryptocurrency. It's not something I'm doing just to learn. Although I will admit I have learned a lot from it. I'm excited about the opportunities it enables. But it is meant to be used as a cryptocurrency. It may not reach adoption. You know, the crypto market is heavily competitive. But it is meant to go out there and be used by people, by businesses, by industries. And I will do all I can to help it get there. That said, pet projects are generally by a single person, generally have a single person managing it, and generally have looser governance because there's not a group of people. It's just one guy says, and he's the only developer. So that's what goes. And because of that, because I'm currently still the only developer who works full-time on this, yeah, I will say Meros shares some of the governance of a pet project. And that currently, if I decide to make a protocol change, say to remove the consensus DAG for the various improvements it offers, I'm going to remove the consensus DAG. It's not really like I have to go around and do surveys and get feedback, although I do reach out to a lot of quality developers I know to get their feedback when stuff like this happens. So I will say it does share attributes with the pet project when it comes to governance. But I'm not treating it like a pet project. I treat it completely seriously and have high hopes for it.
Yes. One point I made is it was actually a conversation that was had in the Meros Discord. There will be a link to the Meros Discord in the description. It's basically a small chat area where Kayaba and the rest of the Meros community hangs out. There are some very, very talented developers in there as well. I made the observation that Linux itself was somewhat of a similar project when it started. And I dare say even Bitcoin would have been the same when it first started, that there was one guy putting it all together until it went to mainnet, and then other people started to join in. So I would agree with you, but I would just say that at this point it's probably better for the project if there is one person taking the lead and making the decisions. That's just my personal opinion.
And of course, when we do get to mainnet, that will really change how things are changed. Basically, if there's no other developers around, of course, it's not like there's really anyone that can officially ask for feedback, but you really have to be careful about how frequently you implement breaking changes. You have to only hard fork every so often. When you hard fork, you need community approval. And I will be sure to be careful about that. And honestly, I do plan to have network upgrades every 6 months to a year. I think stagnant networks like Bitcoin don't really help the users. Even though Bitcoin is making advantages, there could be making a lot more if they were willing to network upgrade.
Yeah.
So I do plan hard forks and network upgrades, but it will become a lot more tight-knit, and I won't randomly just decide, let's remove this thing. Of course, I didn't randomly decide to remove the consensus tag.
Well, I guess you can try, but I do think that there probably will be quite a few people within the fledgling Meros community like myself who are just itching for revolution. We're just, any opportunity we get to overthrow the bourgeoisie, which will be you, we will overthrow. So I think when the time comes, your grip on power will be loosened. That is for sure.
I can't wait for that day. And if someone wants to step up and offer a better code base, they're welcome to. It's the reason I licensed Meros as MIT. I personally believe that you only deserve to be the top project for your code base as long as you actually output quality code.
Yeah.
If someone else says, I can write better code and I can write it faster, they are more than welcome to fork off. They have the license available, the MIT license, they can do that, and they can offer superior code base, and I'll be happy for them.
Yeah, excellent. Well said. Well said. Next question. At what point do you decide to bite the bullet and turn Meros into an ICO to secure funding and bring on more talent?
The answer to that is never. I personally believe ICOs are scams. Of course, a few of them have been successful, a few of them have actually cared about their users, but I think a lot of them don't consider profit as a means for technology, but they consider profit as profit. And I think that type of attitude is what's ruining cryptocurrency, and I think focusing on the market is harming cryptocurrency. And I really want to go back to grass movements where cryptocurrency is about currency, about enabling the people to step away from traditional systems and to have a cash they can trust, one that's decided by code. And I feel ICOs, IEOs are the complete opposite of that. So I will admit the lack of funds has made this difficult. We don't have any institutional investors either. There's a pre-mine, a small one at that, but that doesn't even kick in until mainnet. And because of that, I've been forced to take some contract jobs recently just to keep things going, stay afloat, hopefully hire another developer if they go well enough. And that takes time away from Meros, which is unfortunate. But I'd rather delay it the few weeks it takes me to do contract jobs than put profit above the technology.
Yeah, here. Very, very well said. Second to last question. We're in the home straight, Kayaba, so thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for your time. Pool-resistant mining. Now, is Meros taking steps to make mining pool-resistant? And if so, why? And how is it planning to do that?
Meros does plan to be pool resistant. And the reason for that is, simply put, decentralization. When you get pools with power, it just consolidates things just like Bitcoin, and that poses a threat. It's 2 or 3 Bitcoin pools that could reverse transactions. And one of the advantages I claim for Meros when compared to Nano is security. And if I add pools and if I create that same ecosystem as Bitcoin, that's not secure at all. So the first thing we did to combat that was decide on using random X as a proof of work algorithm. And I feel pool resistance is the next step that we want to use to help that. So in order to be pool resistant, And this isn't a perfect solution. It can still have pools. It just becomes much, much, much more expensive and difficult to do it. And if any pools do appear, we can always take further action to remove them. So what we do is when we run a proof of work hash, we run the proof of work hash 1, and then we have the miner sign it, which means for the miner to actually publish the block, they have to sign it right there and then, which means they need the private key. So a pool would have to give out the private key to their miners, which is a security concern for the pool, which means they're not going to do it. And then once they sign it, they have to execute yet another proof of work hash. And then that hash is the block hash. So the point is just to increase decentralization, become more secure, therefore, increase distribution by putting it back in the hands of the people instead of corporations.
Awesome. Final question, and we're doing absolutely perfect for time now. What items remain to be completed before Meros hits mainnet?
Once we remove the consensus tag, which I'm hoping to have done by the next time we get on a podcast, there will still be a good amount more to do. So once we do that, we have to implement the gas difficulty and send difficulty updates. And those are just for dynamic difficulty, the dynamic spam filter specifically. They're what keeps Meros secure even if an attack were to happen, where people try to flood us with transactions. Then we have to implement Meros script. So we've actually had designs floating around, incomplete, but mostly complete designs for Meros script, which is akin to Bitcoin. It's not full smart contracts like Ethereum, which I do not believe aid the cryptocurrency. I believe they aid programs. While there's nothing wrong with decentralized programs, Meros is trying to be a cryptocurrency, emphasis on the currency. So Meros script is more focusing on time locks and multi-sigs and second layer enabling than programs. So we have the spec floating around, and we have to finish that and implement it. And beyond that, it's just a lot of testing.
Yep. You had mentioned before that you wanted to get an audit done, or an audit or two done as well. So I guess that would have to be accounted for too.
Plan is that when Meros is ready, we're going to have a testnet for weeks to a month. Depending on how it goes. If we need to, we'll make it longer. And during that time, when the code is stable, we're not hard forking, we're not adding upgrades. Maybe some tweaks here and here to the GUI, of course. I plan on getting code reviews done, not by professional auditing firms, but by quality developers I know who are competent enough, just because I don't personally have the money to hire an auditing firm. But I think between the tests, the testnet, and the reviews, we can get to a point where I'm confident Meros will be secure. And I'll feel my moral obligation to not release code that I don't know if it's secure or not, especially since real money is involved. I feel my moral obligation to check that it's safe will be met. And I'll be able to deploy the Meros mainnet.
Awesome. I really, really am looking forward to it. Well, Kayaba, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. As ever, a fountain of knowledge and really nice, succinct answers to all of my questions. So thank you very, very much for joining me on the podcast. Before I let you go, is there anything else you wanted to bring up about Meros for the listeners?
Oh, yes, there is one thing.
Okay.
As part of the just getting ready for mainnet, getting people excited, getting people to know each other in the community, letting people ask questions about Meros, I wanted to plan an event, a roundtable of sorts, which would just be held on our Discord. Let me pull up the date here. It's going to be... Sorry, I just have to pull up the date. Right. So November 16th, Saturday, on 2 p.m. U.S. Central, 7 p.m. UK, 8 p.m. Germany, and then it's actually November 17th, Sunday, 8 a.m. if you're in Australia, as I do know we have one or two Australian members. And I will make an announcement about this, post it on Twitter, post it on the Discord talk. If you have any questions about Meros, if you want to ask me anything, if you want to make any suggestions, if you want to talk about growing the community, if you want to talk about community initiatives, I'll be there and I'll be excited to listen and answer any questions.
Awesome. And did you say it would be text-based or audio-based or video?
It's going to be a bit of both. So it's going to be on a Discord chat, but if you just want to listen and text out your questions, you're more than welcome to. But it will be on a Discord voice channel.
Sounds really exciting. And will you be recording it so that in case people do miss it, because there's bound to be somebody in some part of the world that will be asleep at that time, will you be recording it as well? Because
it's going to be a mix of people talking on voice and then some people who don't have microphones talking on chat. It's really planned to be an in-the-moment community thing. I've tried to pick a time that works well for a lot of people. We hit Australia, US, UK, Europe, really. But I understand that Asia is going to be affected.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But I've tried to pick a time that for most people works. Again, it's November 16th, a Saturday. 2 p.m. US Central, 7 p.m. UK, 8 p.m. Germany.
Oh, that's really exciting. Okay, well, excellent. Yeah, you caught me off guard with that one because we spoke for quite a while before we started.
Well, I wanted it to be a surprise.
Well, you succeeded, sir. Well done. Congratulations. Right, so Kayaba, thank you very much. For everybody who's listening, thanks for listening, basically. And make sure that you like and subscribe and all the other good stuff. Join the Meros Discord. We've had people come trickling in. Excitement is building and people are getting to know each other, and it's developing into quite a nice place. So feel free to drop into the Meros Discord. I myself am in there quite often. Kayaba's in there. It's quite a fun place. You don't have to understand all the things that we speak about in the podcast. I don't understand all the things that we speak about in the podcast, so it's fine. Just make yourself at home. Thank you very much for listening, and until we meet again in the December update, Kayaba, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
This show is brought to you by PivX Private Instant Verified Transactions. With its groundbreaking zero-coin staking and masternodes, PivX is the top privacy currency. Feel free to trade some on Binance or Bittrex. And for more information, go to www.pivex.org.